Hello there and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from Fury of Conviction by Coreene Callahan. Chapter 1. Washington State, Lake Callahan. Standing in the kitchen of his hideaway, Hammersfeld wiped down the countertops. From his position behind the small island he scans the one-room cabin. Squared away, everything in its place. Throw pillows lined up on the long couch facing the river rock fireplace, Hudson's Bay blanket folded over the back, coffee table and comfortable armchairs positioned just right, king-size bed made, sitting snug against the side wall, complete with feather-down duvet, plump pillows and clean sheets. Neat, tidy, ready to serve a singular purpose, to impress his visitor. Hammersfeld frowned. Well, his maybe visitor, he didn't know yet. Kept going back and forth, struggling to decide. Logic suggested he could go either way, veer away from the pack protocol and do the unthinkable, or stay on the straight and narrow and ignore the problem. Hard to do. He'd be turning a blind eye for weeks, trying to make sense of his reaction to a female who wasn't his, and never would be, but nothing worked. He tried and failed to ignore her. Attraction, his inability to stay away, kept shoving reality in his face. Regret rose, burning through him like a long-tailed comet. Ignoring her and the problem was no longer an option. The injustice of the situation refused to leave him alone, poking at him, prodding his conscience and making him want to intervene. But breaking her out, bringing her here to his lakeside sanctuary in the wilds, was a bad idea. The absolute worst, given his tenuous position inside the Razorback pack. And yet that's precisely what his dragon half wanted him to do. Betray his new commander and help this female suffering inside Sen Block A. Uncertainty washed through him. He flexed his hands, dishcloth dripped water between his fingers. Droplets spattered across the worn butcher block countertop. Full of OCD tendencies, his dragon half cleaned it up with a mental swipe. Water evaporated from the wooden top, leaving nothing but the pristine surface behind. His mouth curved. Goddess love his magical side. His beasts might not mind battle and blood, but on their home front his better half despised mess, liked things a certain way, insisting his environment remained tidy wherever he went. Unable to deny the compulsion, Hammersfeld folded the wet cloth and laid it neatly over the spine of the double sink. Stepping around the island, he surveyed the room again. A wall of windows looked out onto the rocky outcropping where he'd set his cabin down. A wide cedar deck cantilevered over the bluff hanging over the cliff and the beach below, providing a perfect springboard whenever the urge to swim overtook him. Which, given his proclivities, was often. Footfalls muffled by thick area rugs, he skirted matching armchairs and approached the floor-to-ceiling windows. Moonlight glinted through the triple panes. Hemmed in by mountains, the narrow lake beyond glinted behind the starry sky, its calm surface coaxed into gentle ripples by a marauding north wind. Mesmerised by the sight, Hammersfeld stared at the dark blue water. Tension released, cascading down his spine to flow smooth and silk through the soles of his feet. Taut muscles relaxed. Cracking his neck, he inhaled deep and exhaled long, his gaze on the view. He loved it here, lakeside tucked between mountains and forest. The single-room cottage made for the perfect setup, reminding him of home, of deep Nordic fjords, rough terrain and seaside bonfires. The thought should have brought pangs of longing, but homesickness no longer came when he pictured his native Norway. Too much time had passed, too much pain lay in that direction, too many bad memories tainting the yearning most warriors felt when far from the land of their birth. Here, though, in the wilds of America, he'd found his place, a lovely little getaway, a secret hidey hole, far from glaring city lights and the demands of his new pack, somewhere to escape after a long night, and Hammersfeld huffed. Right, sure, nice idea, but an unlikely scenario. Escaping to his cabin no longer happened on a regular basis. He couldn't get away every day. Ivor needed him inside the lair, corralling warriors, planning missions, overseeing the day-to-day operations of a busy dragonkind pack. Why the hell had he agreed to become Ivor's first in command? Hammersfeld sighed. No clue. He ought to have his head examined, or say fuck it and fly out. Go somewhere else, someplace quieter, far from the constant demands. A tempting proposition. Total knee-jerk reaction. He already spent too much time alone. Had existed for centuries on the fringes of dragonkind society, part of it, but not really, until Ivor. The male was solid, felt real to him in ways he didn't understand and couldn't quantify. His bond with the leader of the Razorbacks surprised him. The intensity of the connection, the honesty, kinship, and deep sense of brotherhood spoke to him, urging him to stick with it. The idea was startling, the feeling even worse. Ivor trusted him, a warrior most males feared and avoided, a water dragon with a bad track record, no ties to anyone or anything before Ivor reeled him in and gave him purpose. A cause to care about beyond Fen, his wren and only companion. A place to call home even though Hammersfeld wasn't sure he deserved to belong anywhere, especially given what he'd done, what he continued to do every day. He'd lied right out of the gate, giving Ivor a false sense of him. Normally he wouldn't care. Rumours about him abounded. His lone dragon status, the undeniable brutality slithering through his veins, and the fact most of his kind believed he'd murdered females and his own children. Untrue and a giant lie, one he'd refused to counter with the truth. He didn't kill his own offspring, Ristos. He'd spent centuries trying to have one. Each time the meridian realigned, he tried again. The cycle was never ending. Find a strong female, spend the night of realignment with her, wait to see if she bore fruit, but nothing ever happened. Despite his best efforts, he remained childless, alone in the world, without the son he so desperately wanted. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Hammersfeld shook his head. Too much heartache, continual pain, the brutal reality of a dream unrealised. A yearning he set on the back burner most days, determined to ignore the ache, but with Ivor's plan in full swing, he couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. He should come clean and tell the truth, give his commander the information he needed. And yet he couldn't, and for some unfathomable reason, lying to Ivor bothered him. It wasn't about honesty. He wasn't above using deception when it served his purpose. Hell, he had been doing it for years, pushing the myth, letting dragonkind all over the world believe the worst about him. A good plan when dealing with untrustworthy males, not so hot while trying to build a new life. After so many years on his own, he longed for community, for camaraderie, a launchpad into a deeper connection with a warrior searching for the same. Hammersfeld clenched his teeth. This idiocy couldn't go on. He needed to be honest about the Night Fury. Wanting to fit in, needing a safe place to land, he'd misled Ivor, steering him toward rumour and away from the fact Mac, the Night Fury commander's water rat, didn't belong to his ancestral line. How did he know? The magical mark on the warrior's scales didn't match his own. Passed from side to sun, the tribal link always matched. Shape, size, location on the body, down to the millimetre, which meant he hadn't signed the bastard. Mac couldn't be his son. Approaching the double doors, Hammersfeld opened the pair with a mental flick. Well-oiled hinges hissed as the glass panel swung wide, without pause. He strode over the threshold, out into the moonlight. Boots thudding across cedar planks, he approached the deck edge and murmured a command. His clothes disappeared. Standing naked beneath the night sky, he tilted his head back and, skin steaming, basked in the cold March air. Not long now, just 3 weeks until the meridian realigned, and he'd be forced to decide. About her. The redhead, she with the gorgeous energy, the female he shouldn't want but couldn't keep from craving. Flexing his hands, he murmured, Fen. Magic whispered against his skin, the tribal tattoo bracketing his spine rippled in response. Dark blue ink heated, smoothed into a light grey, then started to glow. Light washed across the deck, painting tall pines and short scrubs as the wren reacted to his call. Power pulsing in his veins, Hammersfeld hummed. Night's fallen, time to move. With a growl, the wren obeyed. Separating from his skin, feathers of black mist whirled round him as Fen took shape and form. Shadowed turned to shark grey scales, dark wings, lethal claws, and yellow glowing eyes. Hammersfeld smiled as a miniature dragon hovered, waiting for the usual. Completing the greeting, he reached out to stroke Fen, caressing the collar of spikes ringing the wren's throat. Drawing a fight, the blades would stand on end, but with no threat in sight, the lethal daggers lay flat against the side of his neck. Drawing his thumb along the middle of Fen's snout, he scratched him behind the horns. Sleep well? Tilting his small head, Fen leaned into his touch, then chuffed in agreement. Good, he murmured, more concerned about Fen's rest than his own, which was stupid. Without him, Fen would die. Bonded in the way of the ancients, his life force kept the wren alive, plugging the miniature dragon into the meridian, the electrostatic bands ringing the planet, the source of nourishment for all living things, allowing Fen to survive on Earth. Time to fly. Cascades? Fen asked, communicating the only way he could through mindspeak, and Hammersfeld nodded. Putting it off any longer wasn't a good idea. As the Razorback's first in command, Ivor expected him to stay on top of things. to keep the warriors competing for the right to breed with one of Ivor's he-females in check. Held inside the city lair, the females were comfortable enough, well treated, well fed, given anything they wanted, though held was a nice way of putting it. Imprisoned was a better word. Hammersfeld rolled his shoulders, attacking the tension. He didn't agree with Ivor's plan, didn't like cell blockade or the fact 6 high-energy females lived inside the comfortable complex. He'd never been one for harems, or the high walls and lack of freedom associated with the ancient custom, a subject he'd broached with Ivor more than once. Not that he opposed to the breeding programme or its commander's objective. The serum Ivor developed in his state-of-the-art laboratory was ingenious. Dragonkind needed females of their own. Being forced to rely on human females for sustenance couldn't continue long-term. Too bad the goddess of all things was a vindictive bitch. In a fit of temper, the goddess had lost her mind and done the unthinkable, making one race reliant on another to procreate, dividing dragonkind into an intolerable situation in order to survive. Reliance, the worst kind of insult for a breed stronger than any other species on the planet. So, no question, Ivor's instinct to end their dependence on humans amounted to a good one. But that didn't mean HE females needed to be imprisoned to achieve the goal, at least in his view. Catch and release worked just as well. Set up a tracking system. Wouldn't take much effort to locate an HE. Inject her with the serum without her being the wiser, embed a tracking device beneath her skin. Follow individual subjects remotely, allowing each to live her life unfettered until the meridian realigned. Little fuss. No muss. Problem solved. No need to curb a female's freedom or take her life before the infant was born. The ends, after all, didn't always justify the means. He valued his freedom, which meant he must value others. Otherwise, he was nothing but a hypocrite. And Sylphus balls, he muttered, raking his hair away from his face. He'd gone off the deep end. No way should he care this much. Giving a damn had never been his MO. And honestly, the manner in which Ivor set up the breeding problem wasn't his problem, and yet he hated it. Despised watching a redhead suffer night after night. He growled at the sky. She's driven me mad, Fen. It's the only explanation. Pretty girl, pretty girl, pretty girl, Fen said, parroting what Hammersfeld thought every day. Yeah, he murmured, back to deliberating, back to the uncertainty, back to hoping the cabin was clean enough if he decided to break ranks and bring her to his sanctuary. Shaking his head, he waved the wren away. Go. Cold air blasted his chest as Fen wind flapped, taking flight. Hammersfeld watched him wheel around the tops of the tall pines, then called on his own magic. Water vapour swirling around him, he shifted from human to dragon form. Sharp grey scales replaced his skin as his hands, feet turned to paws and claws. His night vision sparked, sonar up and running, he sent an exploratory pulse. The surge gathered speed, spilling over rugged terrain, moulding over nearby towns, grabbing information to send back to him. Nothing and no one near him. Not surprising. The north end of the lake rarely saw action. Humans kept to the south end, enjoying the marina. Fancy coffee shops and wineries instead of the more mountainous terrain. Wood planks groaning beneath his bulk, he tucked his wings and dove over the bluff. The bay winked below him and splashed down. Fresh water rushed over his smooth, interlocking dragon skin. The jagged sawtooth fin along his spine cut through the water as he headed north. Swimming fast, he slid through the water, snaking around jagged rocks in deep water, tracking Fen as the wren flew above him over the surface. At the end of the lake, he ran out of real estate and, thrusting upward, exploded out of the water. Droplets blew off his scales, splashing into the Callahan lake as he was rocketed into the night sky, ranked right towards Cascade Mountain Range and the makeshift warrior camp nestled in the woodlands. I hope you enjoyed this chapter reading and that you'll go check out the book. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.